This is Aberration Earth. Our adventure continues. Little to his newfound friend's knowledge, he was making a record for later study. He had questions about the geography and why there were so few large land masses. That could wait for later, though. The giant spaceman gathered his thoughts before continuing, speaking slowly as he relayed his own people's history. Our colony was established by settlers from Earth. It was the second of 6 missions sent out into the stars, and planned over a 300-year period, started at the end of what they called the 29th century by the World Federal Authority. That was the global government at the time. After a period of strife, mankind had a driving desire for expansion beyond this world, and set itself and all its resources towards that task. My planet, Leopold 7, it is 1,000 light years from here. The entire Leopold system was named after the original colony leader, Dr. Francis Leopold. He died during that 98-year journey, but it was because of his work that we found that system and were able to successfully settle it. By the time my descendants had established a semblance of life for themselves on our new world, all contact with Earth had been lost. That was only 3 years after they arrived. All of that happened more than 9,000 years before I was born. The Havenite was on his stool, staring wide-eyed. His mouth hung open at what he had just heard. A moment later, he snapped back to himself and, taking a big drink from his cup, sat up straighter, replying after taking a long breath. I'm not familiar with this 20-something century business you describe, or the existence of such a government as that, but 9,000 years? It doesn't even seem possible. Sounds like a fantasy to my ears, but I know it's not. I just have a hard time imagining such a world as one that can send men out into the stars, to live on other worlds so far away. Then maybe we both have something we can relate to, because I could not imagine a world with these nightmare-blanched creatures, magical fairies, fire-breathing lizards, and who knows what else until now. The Zaxfoyan offered in return, hoping to assure his new friend that he wasn't the only one who was questioning what he believed. Merrick pressed on, enjoying telling his story somewhat more than he expected, while the captain quietly pondered the words he was hearing. Thankfully, my people keep meticulous records, and we were able to preserve all this knowledge throughout the millennia since. We inherited the technology of where we had come from, and with it, we were able to carry on, and even thrive eventually. But it wasn't easy, and many died. Strict protocols were adopted to ensure our continuing survival. It took us 5,000 years and generations to master the environment of Leopold 7 and modify ourselves and the atmosphere enough to finally exit our colony enclosures and really begin development. After that, our civilization flourished. Communities expanded and cities were established. We grew and ventured throughout the solar system, finding a wealth of resources. Our technology began to advance again. After many millennia of stagnation, a desire welled within many of us to re-establish a connection with the distant world we originated from. Adrift in the cosmos for so long, I can imagine the yearning that would come with that, Jenker said wistfully as he poured himself another cup from the open bottle, having emptied the first. Perhaps. We all have our own motivations. For myself, it was duty. I joined the program at the age of 22 and went through 2 decades of training before our ship was sent out to find this planet, Ventrulis remarked, his mind wandering through old memories. For 42, you look like you could eat 100 men in their prime without breaking a sweat, the captain squawked at him, waving an arm to illustrate his preposterously large frame. Technically, I would be 81, after the 19 years it took us to get here, the spaceman shared with some reluctance. Ha! Then I stand corrected, old man, the Havenite replied, slapping the table as a wide grin slowly spread out over his face, bringing them both to near tears as unrestrained laughter erupted between the pair. After that moment of mirth passed, Merrick explained, "When we are frozen during the sleep for long voyages, our bodies do not age. We have mastered this process since the day our ancestors left this world, refining it and making it even more efficient. It has allowed some of my people to extend their lives for centuries." "That's a handy trick. Can't say we have anything like that," Damad responded, raising his brow in wonder and tipping his cup for another sip. "Don't be so quick to dismiss what you have here. Remember, our technology came from Earth. I've scanned one of your books. It alludes to the terrible times our species has gone through. Periods forgotten," Ventrulus remarked, pointing over his shoulder at the shelves behind him. "Forgotten catastrophes?" the captain said with curiosity, removing his hat and placing it on the table so that he could itch his head. "But that's just a book of folk tales, myths, stories to pass the time. They aren't real." The Zaxfoyan shook his head in the negative, and replying seriously, said, "From the small bit I translated, there are too many factual data points corresponding with our records to classify it as just fiction, though I suppose without having such an archive I can understand your disbelief. I assure you, it is not to be dismissed. If you have similar volumes, I would like to browse through them." Taking a long drink that drained his second cup, the Havenite answered with a touch of uncertainty within his words, "Of course, you saved my life. Again, this is a lot, even for an old sea skipper like me to swallow, even with all that I've seen now." "I understand." The spaceman knew where he was coming from. His own journey had been just as unbelievable. Deciding it best to discuss other things, he asked, "So now you know where I come from and how I came to be here. Can you tell me about your people, about this world? Are you Havenites the governing authority on Earth?" "Governing authority? We're our own authority. We control the waters from the ice coast all the way in the north to the Great Valence in the far south. To the west we dominate beyond the edge of the Blanched Lands, and to the east we hold sway up until the endless deep." Jenker stood and motioned across the map between them, indicating each place with the cup in his hand. Merrick noted the locations as he spoke. He didn't understand all these references, but he was happy to put names to the different geographical locations and add more details into his own internal map. He was content with absorbing as much information as his host would offer, and so he prodded him to continue. "How much of the world does that cover? What scale am I looking at here?" "Oh, about 4,000 nautical miles east to west and nearly as much from north to south, I'd say," the captain answered. Ventrulus considered this as he scanned the map. According to his own records, this was a sizable area, though most of it was open waters with little land. "Do you have cities?" the spaceman wondered, looking at the few islands that were marked here. "In a manner of speaking, my home is at Havenlock Harbor, when not at sea. I was thinking we might go there. In the meantime, we could use a powerhouse like you around the ship. You're welcome to come along with us," Damad responded, extending the invitation as he refilled their cups. There came upon them a sudden and terrible noise within the ship. Their stomachs dropped as an unknown power violently shook the urchin gull, forcing both men to hold on to the bolted-down table to keep from being tossed about. The regular illumination dimmed immediately. Strobing red and white emergency lighting filled the cabin, projecting from bulbs that had been secreted behind recessed panels that slid open without warning. Merrick looked with confusion towards the Havenite across from him, whose face had now twisted into a grimace of naked irritation, plainly more angry than afraid. "It's an emergency ascent. Something must have happened," Jenker yelled out, as the pressure continued to build with every passing second. The urchin gull was moving through the water faster than one would imagine possible. The roar caused by the displacement inside the ship was deafening, yet the crew responded to the crisis with seasoned discipline, as if they had gone through this 1,000 times. "What's the emergency?" Ventrulus shouted back to his host. "Not sure, but it's probably blasted old father on the move," the Havenite replied loudly. Then the man from outer space remembered the underwater mountain ranges, one of which had launched him far over the waves with barely a touch. A colossal aquatic geological oddity he had thought at the time. "Are you talking about those moving ocean mountains?" the Zaxvoyan shouted. "Ha! Those aren't mountains, my friend. It is he who holds the world. They are the loving arms of old Father Kraken, whom we both adore and despise, pray to and curse at," the captain roared in response. And there ends this episode. Until next time, thanks for listening. Please engage the like button and subscribe to the channel for more content.